Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today in this joint webinar with Oak Street Funding and our parent company, First Financial Bank. Today, we're joined by Rick Dennen, Chief Corporate Banking Officer and CEO and founder of Oak Street Funding, and Nick Ritter, the Chief Information Security Officer of First Financial Bank. I'm Kirsten Petras, Executive Sales Director here at Oak Street. So from your feedback on what is important to you as business owners and operators and leadership, we're here to talk cybersecurity today. Many of you joined because you want to be more aware of cyber attacks and the tools and best practices to protect yourself, your money, and your business. The registration questions we felt could be put into 3 categories: awareness, specific prevention tools, and best practices. So let's just jump right in, Nick. How big of an issue is cybersecurity?
So the risk has always been there to some degree. I mean, I've been in the industry for a little over 20 years, so there's always been something, but it definitely has grown over the last, say, 10 years. And it feels very acute for specific business owners around ransomware and items like that over the last, say, 3 or 4 years. So I think they said the Haverjack Group, one of the Shark Tank guys, he has a consulting group, and security is one of their main focuses. They estimated the total cost of cyber attacks globally in this year will top $6 trillion.
That's amazing.
So it's a big deal, and it's a growing concern.
Yeah, I think so as well. I've noticed, and I've got 3 kids in college that have gone through college, but you look at the number of cybersecurity majors. I saw, one college with 8 different programs, but the number of colleges having cybersecurity programs is just going through the roof. And I agree with you, Nick. I think this is going to be something that actually gets more prevalent in business and the economy in the future than actually slowing down.
Rick, you bring up a great point. We have a young generation, the next generation of the workforce, actually being educated to cybersecurity. You started this company, Oak Street, in 2003, when you were the only employee of Oak Street. What were some steps you've taken from a company of 1 to a company of 100 that you've done to engage your staff in recognizing the importance of protecting the information that we get here at Oak Street?
Well, I would say when you start with 1 employee, you don't have the same type of concerns you do today, and the risk certainly didn't exist, the level of sophistication and things like that. You always start a business with a lot of controls and trying to define process and things like that, and during that, to minimize different ways that you could be hacked, or at that point in time it's pretty much data focused, and how can you prevent leaks of that data. Today it's much different, and I think without the partnership of the bank, having the ability to hire experts like Nick with the experience that's needed to truly prevent these issues. If we were a standalone company at this point in time, we would not have this level of sophistication. But the size of a company, to me, really doesn't matter as to the likelihood or probability of cyber attacks happening. I think small and large have the same risks. I think the large have the ability, like Nick, to spend some money, prevent some of those things much easier than smaller companies do.
Rick, to your point of having controls in place, whether you're a company of 4 people or 40 or 4,000, one of the questions that came in was, how do you as a business owner encourage people to implement the best practices that are not always convenient, and they actually say, like sharing passwords, which I think we all know we aren't supposed to do, but I think we all can admit maybe happens more often than we think than it should be.
I think that's certainly evolved over time, in the way that we look at companies and underwrite. The question of cyber came up, and do we assess cybersecurity with each of our customers that we're doing business with? And I think the answer is, it's looked at from a business perspective, but it's not, part of the underwriting criteria. Hey, check the box, validate, insurance of cybersecurity, which I think is an entirely different topic that we'll touch on here and need to. But I think those types of questions are going to start coming into some of the decision making of the bank. So, again, just being a prudent operator, setting up a company that's institutional, that can grow, certainly something that needs to be evaluated.
Nick, a lot of questions that are very practical in nature. One is, how can I find out what prevention methods I have in the first place, firewalls, etc.?
Yeah, some of that's a little bit technical, going into the different settings menus of your computers and stuff like that. I think about it as at a little higher level for a lot of business owners. And I happen to be a small business owner myself. I have a catering company, a butcher shop, and another retail business as well. Kind of a side hustle, right?
There you go.
And when we kind of take an approach of what I call the 3 P's of cybersecurity, which is protect, plan, and practice. So protect, we have to understand what it is that's really important to us and then put the controls around those things. For my catering company and my butcher shop, it's really all about the money. The money in the account is the most important thing. Everything else is either physical touch or is inconsequential in terms of the computer that we use or something like that. So if something bad happened to it, it doesn't shut the business down. It really doesn't affect revenue, but money transaction does. So make sure that we have the protections in place around financial transactions. So that's the protect part. Understand what you have and protect it. The plan part, have a plan, not just of what happens when something goes bad. You need that plan. But also have a plan of who you're talking to for technology, who you're working with. I don't do my own taxes. I've got a professional that does the bookkeeping and does taxes and so forth like that. And similarly, most people need a technology professional when they have a business. They need a technology professional that they can talk to, they can rely on, and that understands and can talk to security with them and give them practical solutions. So that's the plan part of it. And then the practice good hygiene. I know we're going to share passwords. Make sure they're really complicated, that people don't memorize them, and that we store them in a password vault, right? One of those password keepers, or keep password safes that are on your phone or on your computer or something like that. Change those things often, right? So when you use it, somebody uses it, then change it, and then put the new one back in the password safe so that everybody who's using it is actually using a new one. So even though you think you're sharing a password, you're really not, because that password's changing every time. Those are the kinds of things, so that again, it's protect, understand, put controls around, plan, make sure everybody understands what to do, have somebody to talk to, and practice good hygiene. So install your updates and things like that.
So a follow-on question to that I have. When you think about plan, the one thing that does concern me in the future is that cybersecurity is changing every single day. So the plan that you have, needs to be updated. I mean, you can read a different phishing. We were talking smishing, all these different types of cybersecurity attacks that occur. Like, how do you stay up on those? Because you have very sophisticated parties behind the scenes running these scams that are highly technical, highly funded. You know what I mean? And so how do you stay up on that stuff and plan for that accordingly?
I think the most important thing is don't try to boil the ocean. You know what's important to you in your business. So put the protections and the plans around that. It's financial transactions. So there's probably a lot of different ways of separating me from my money, but I have a plan and controls around that. If it's intellectual property and you're a manufacturing company and you've got very specific dies or specific manufacturing techniques, then you've got to protect that. You've got to understand how to protect that.
So it's really assessing the risks that you have.
And then the other part is have a good partner. Again, even though I'm a cyber expert, our point of sale system and stuff like that is all managed at the retail shops that we have. Those are all managed services. We don't do the updates on them. We don't do any of the processing. We don't do anything like that because it's not our expertise area. Yeah. So, be expert at what you're expert at, know what's important, and then have partners to help you.
Got it.
So to that point, there was a question you mentioned about passcodes. Is there a checklist or app or tool to reconcile computers and phones and personal safety like passcodes? So you mentioned the Vault. What are some tools out there that everybody could benefit from?
Yeah, I think there's Passkeeper and there's 1Pass. There's a number of different tools that are out there for specifically saving passwords or utilizing passwords. And those are all great tools. And I don't think any one is particularly better than the other. There's also some great tools out there that can help just your general computer security, right? So the Microsoft Windows operating system has a tool called Defender that's built into it. Excellent tool, works extraordinarily well. There's CrowdStrike, there's Carbon Black, all things that you can go get a $10 a month subscription to and put on your system and have a ton of protections. I definitely recommend those kinds of things over your standard Symantec or Norton antivirus. Those things tend not to be as effective against some of the more modern techniques around ransomware and stuff like that. But the CrowdStrikes, the Carbon Blacks, the Defenders of the world are really quite good.
So a question that came in was, how does fiber optic telephone service affect cybersecurity?
Not so much, except more faster. So the fiber optic doesn't actually, all it is a way of moving data closer to the speed of light, right? And more data through a particular wire closer to the speed of light to a destination. It doesn't affect the attack vectors or the network traffic itself or anything like that. So, but what it does do is it creates a situation where attackers that have fiber optics coming in can utilize more and more computers to attack a single target, right? Because they have more bandwidth, they have more throughput, they have faster speeds, that they can get to their destination faster. And that's really, there's nothing any more technical than just more faster.
So you mentioned partners and gathering an array of partners, and many of the people listening today may be banking clients of ours. So you have protections that you're putting in place in your own hardware. Are there protections through banking partners, whether it's a First Financial Bank customer or another banking customer, that may be available to them, knowing that money is, of course, something that makes everyone quite nervous and definitely wanting to protect?
100%. There are the bank offers a lot of tools to help fraud. So in First Navigator, which is our commercial online banking tool, there are a number of things within the transaction management system, TMS, things like Positive Pay that allows you to do transaction matching. There's Positive Pay associated with checks, so that if somebody, for example, took a check and stole the physical check and then rewrote who the payee was but left the amount the same. So you got a $10,000 check. It was going to the gas and electric company, but now it's going to John Smith, bad guy. One of the Positive Pay features is it will look and say, hey, you wrote a $10,000 check with that check number, and it already went to the gas and electric company. Are you sure you want John Smith, bad guy, to get it? Another copy of that. So there are tools around that. There are dual controls. So one of the big concerns for small businesses is a thing called business email compromise, right? So this is when you get an email and it comes from somebody that says they're part of the company or part of the transaction chain that you're a part of, right? So I would get an email from Rick, and it would say, or somebody pretending to be Rick, and it would say, hey, send a wire for $10,000 to this person. Do it urgently. I'm away from my desk. I can't do it right now. And so being a good employee, I log into my computer and I send a $10,000 wire. And then Rick comes back in the office and goes, that wasn't me. Where'd the money go? That's a very good example of business email compromise. So when you have dual control, what you do is I initiate it, but then somebody else has to approve it. And that dual control is a big step. It's a big help in combating some of that urgent wire fraud kind of things that occur. And then, of course, multi-factor authentication, those kinds of things are also available through First Navigator. And as you look through those like 3 Ps that we talked about to protect, one of the thing is if you have a lot of business processes that run through email becomes a very important thing for you.
Yeah.
It's really important for everybody. I mean, we all live on our phones and are in our inboxes, but if you are transacting business through email, you're doing transactions, you probably need to put some controls around transaction verification or something like that that's out of band, outside of email. But even if you don't do that, you have to be really diligent about your email. So the old Carpenter mantra, measure twice, cut once, kind of the same thing. If you're sending money based on an email or you're doing a transaction based on email, measure twice, cut once.
Great tip. As we kind of move into some best practices and tips, in terms of that protection, that added layer of protection, Rick, we lend money to insurance agents. I've certainly, in the years I've been here, seen an upswing in the offering of cyber insurance coverages. Something to explore with their insurance agents if they don't have
I think it's absolutely something to explore and something to put in place very quickly.
The insurance thing is a really weird game right now because it's evolving so quickly. I mean, 3 years ago, it looked wildly different than it did last year, and this year it looks wildly different than it did last year. Almost unrecognizable from what it looked like 3 years ago. There are a couple of things that I'm 100% certain will continue. Things like ransomware sublimitations are going to continue. So you want to lock in terms sooner rather than later, as much as possible, right? And so that's one thing. The second thing is being a new cyber customer is always going to be harder than being an existing one. So it's one of those things where, well, I'll wait till next year. It's going to get harder to get coverage next year.
Yeah.
There are just a lot of underwriters that are saying, no, we're not taking any new customers right now. And the third thing is the longer we go down this road, the more insurance companies are going to drive security requirements.
So one of the questions that came in is, what is being done in terms of best practices and tips? What is being done to combat the issues of your system being corrupted, but you don't find out about it for days, if not weeks? So all your backups are corrupted. How do you fight this issue?
Yeah, So a couple of things. One, if you have ransomware, you're going to know it immediately because it's not like it's going to stick around and live on your systems for days or months or years, and then suddenly you're going to be locked up. Ransomware is kind of one of those, we get you, we lock you up, we hold you ransom. So you don't have to worry about that from a standpoint, but there are other types of compromise, like email compromise. So somebody's in your email, reading your email and doing the business email compromise type stuff, or stealing competitive information or underbidding contracts or things like that. The average, according to IBM's, they do an annual threat and cybersecurity report every year. This year, they said the average was 487 days to discovery and containment of a cybersecurity incident. That's actually an improvement over what it's been in the past. It's 287 days. I think 2 years ago it was 487 days. So 287 days. It's almost a year that people are compromised they don't know about. So what you need to do is kind of back to that, the 3 Ps, protect, plan, and practice, good hygiene. Make sure that you have what we call layers of defense. So I've got a piece of Swiss cheese. It's got a bunch of holes in it. I put another piece of Swiss cheese on top of it. It's got holes on it, but the holes don't overlap. So by the third piece of Swiss cheese, it's a solid piece of cheese, right? So if I know what's most critical within my organization, and I put the protections around that, and that's my inner circle, my inner ring of my castle, and I go out from there, by the time you get to what's really important, I'm well protected. That's your best defense against it, is protecting that core inner ring.
What you just described, we are 100% identical with how we develop credit. You know, the same type of process goes through. It's, you got a hole in your cheese, you got to put another piece of cheese in to plug the hole so you can't see through it.
It's risk management. Yeah. At the end of the day, it's risk management. Credit
right?
Risk management, it's cyber risk management. It's about risk management.
I agree with you.
So we have time for a couple more questions that have come in. A person asked, my area of interest is funding. There seems to be many scammers on the web as well as LinkedIn who offer funding. How can I weed out those scammers and find legit sources? Rick, I'm going to go ahead and ask you this since I think you spend quite a bit of time surfing the internet during the day.
I do, most of my day. Thank you, Kirsten. I think it's pretty easy. To what Nick said is, being a carpenter is measure twice, cut once. Going out there and seeing, through Google, you can find a lot out through the internet. You can make calls. You can check with centers of influence in those markets and really see who's credible and who's going to do a good job and versus those that are invalid.
Certainly before you input any personal information into a form, social security numbers, phone numbers, addresses, definitely do your homework. Well, we're getting ready to come on to the half an hour here, but one last thing for everyone. Are there 3 things everyone can do right away that'll help protect themselves, Nick?
I go back to my 3 Ps, right? Protect, understand what you have, put some protections around it, have a plan in place that everybody understands of what your protections are, how you're doing it, what happens if something goes wrong, and then practice good hygiene, right? Make sure that everybody's on the same page. They understand what the risk is. They understand the measure twice, cut once kind of mentality. They understand the controls in place and practice good hygiene. Do things like install your updates and stuff like that. When your iPhone tells you to install updates tonight, install updates tonight.
Yeah, what Nick has is absolutely, it's simple, but yet it's a good way to approach this. And I really think that this is applicable to small and large companies. And there's not anybody that I think can avoid not addressing this issue and this topic. They may not have as many risks in one business or another, but you've got to be thinking about this. So, Nick, thank you very much.
Rick, Nick, have a great day. Thank you so much.